My name is Dylan Porter, and I've always considered myself an ordinary man. I'm 42 years old, with a job that doesn't excite many people. High school history teacher. I've been teaching at the same small school just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, for the past 15 years. Nothing about my life is extraordinary. I wake up each day at 6:30 a.m., make a pot of coffee, and then spend the next 8 hours lecturing on ancient civilizations, U.S. history, and the occasional history of pop culture. The afternoons are spent grading papers and preparing lessons, and by 5 p.m., I'm usually out the door and heading home. Dinner's ready by the time I walk through the door. That was the routine, day in and day out, for as long as I can remember. It was spring, and the Arizona sun was already starting to heat things up. I had just finished a meeting with a few students about an upcoming history project, and I was looking forward to my usual quiet evening with Amanda. We had been married for 7 years. She was the love of my life, the woman I'd always thought I'd grow old with. She had a way of making the mundane feel special. Even after all this time, I still found joy in the little things, cooking dinner together, watching bad TV shows, or just sitting on the porch, talking about the day. She had that rare gift of making everything feel comfortable and right. I remember walking into the house that day, the smell of her favorite vanilla candle drifting down the hallway from the living room. I didn't expect anything to be different. I expected Amanda to be in the kitchen, maybe with a cup of tea, or upstairs, reading one of her mystery novels. It was the same every day. But instead, as I stepped through the door, I was greeted by something I wasn't prepared for. A police officer stood in the middle of our living room, his expression serious. "Mr. Porter?" he asked, his voice low, almost too soft. I froze. A sense of dread washed over me. I could feel my chest tighten. I had no idea what was coming next. "Yes? What's going on?" I managed to get out, though my voice sounded unfamiliar to me. "I'm afraid I have some bad news," the officer said, taking a step closer. "Your wife was involved in a fatal car accident about an hour ago." He paused, scanning my face for a reaction. "We tried reaching you at the hospital, but you weren't answering your phone." I stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. A part of me was still in shock, unable to process the information. I had just left work not an hour ago, and I couldn't imagine how Amanda could be dead. No, this had to be a mistake. I shook my head, my voice faltering. "No," I said, my words coming out thick with disbelief. "That can't be right. She's upstairs, sleeping. You must have the wrong person." The officer's face didn't give anything away, but there was a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I felt my heart race as I stood up and led him upstairs, my steps faltering. As I pushed open the bedroom door, I saw Amanda lying there, curled up under the covers, looking as peaceful as ever. Her brown hair was spread out on the pillow. She looked right, perfectly at ease in the room that had been our sanctuary for so many years. I stood there for a moment, stunned by the sight of her. There was nothing about her that seemed off. "See?" I said, my voice still shaky, but with a glimmer of hope. "That's Amanda, my wife." The officer didn't move. His hand twitched at his side as though he was debating whether to draw his weapon. He took a cautious step forward, his eyes scanning Amanda as if looking for something that wasn't there. He turned to me then, his expression unreadable. "Sir, I need you to step away from her," he said slowly, his hand hovering near his holster. I didn't understand. Why was he so tense? Why was he acting like Amanda wasn't the woman I had married? "Why?" I asked, confusion creeping into my voice. "What's going on?" Then Amanda stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, and she blinked a few times, adjusting to the dim light in the room. When she saw the officer standing at the foot of the bed, she sat up quickly, pulling the blanket around herself. "Dylan, what's going on?" Her voice was still thick with sleep, but the tone was unmistakable, the same tone she always used when something was off. "Who's this?" The officer took a step back, clearly still unsure of what to do. "Ma'am, what's your name?" he asked, his voice tight. "Amanda Porter," she said, frowning at the officer. "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" Her words made no sense to me. I stared at her, still unable to grasp what was happening. The officer seemed to hesitate before pulling out his phone. His voice was steady when he spoke. "I need a supervisor at 1425 Eucalyptus Lane," he said, his tone urgent. and I need someone from the morgue to send over photos of the DOA from the accident on the I-10. I'm at the residence. Something isn't right. While he was on the phone, Amanda turned to me, her face filled with confusion. Dylan, what is happening? Why is there a cop in our bedroom? She asked, looking at me for answers. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Amanda, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, they said you died in a car accident. But you're right here. You're in our bed. I don't understand. I turned to the officer. What is going on? The officer stared at Amanda for a long moment, as if he was still trying to decide whether this was some sort of sick joke. Finally, he spoke. We need to run some checks, he said, his voice laced with uncertainty. I nodded slowly, not sure what I was even agreeing to. All I could do was sit there, the room closing in around me, and wonder how the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, could be caught up in something so bizarre, so impossible. The next few hours were a blur. I remember sitting in the living room, the silence between Amanda and me stretching like an endless chasm. The officer, now accompanied by more law enforcement, seemed unsure of how to handle the situation. They conducted a series of checks, asking Amanda to provide identification, and when she did, the officer studied her driver's license like it might suddenly change. I watched him, my mind reeling. Amanda was my wife, the woman I had built my life with. I knew her, knew every part of her, the way she laughed, how she liked her coffee, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the books she was reading. And yet, here I was, doubting everything I thought I knew. A few minutes later, Officer Keller, stepped outside to make a call. The air in the room felt thick, oppressive. Amanda's confusion mirrored my own. She sat beside me, her hand gripping mine like a lifeline. Dylan, she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. What's happening? What did he mean when he said I died? I couldn't answer her. How could I? I wanted to say that it was just a mistake, a misunderstanding. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that this was all just some bizarre error that would be sorted out. But there was a knot in my stomach, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. The officer's behavior, his reluctance to believe she was the real Amanda, it felt too real, too far beyond anything I could explain. Why don't we just call your parents? I suggested weakly, as if that would make it all go away. They'll know what's going on. They can help. Amanda shook her head slowly. I haven't talked to them in weeks, she said, her voice low. I don't want to bother them with this. What if I'm the one who's wrong? What if I'm the one who's not real? I felt a chill run through me. The fear in her voice was real. The doubt wasn't just in me. It was in her, too. It was as if, with every question, we were both slipping further away from the life we'd built together and into some other version of reality that neither of us understood. Just then, another officer entered the room, a woman in her late 30s who immediately took control of the situation. She introduced herself as Captain Sarah Ellis, her presence commanding, her expression serious. I stood up as she approached, unsure of what to say. Mr. and Mrs. Porter, I need to ask you some very specific questions, she said, her tone flat. I need complete honesty from both of you. Amanda and I exchanged a look, and I could see the worry in her eyes. I could feel the same panic building in my chest. Of course, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Captain Ellis sat down across from us, the other officers taking their places nearby. Mrs. Porter, she began, her voice neutral. Do you have any siblings? A twin, perhaps? Amanda's brow furrowed. No, she replied, shaking her head. I'm an only child. My parents had trouble having me, actually. They used to say I was their miracle baby. The captain nodded, writing something down. Have you ever been contacted by anyone claiming to be related to you? Any strange phone calls, emails, letters? No, Amanda answered again, her voice quiet but firm. I haven't received anything like that. I don't know what's going on here. The captain exchanged a glance with Officer Keller and then, as if she had been expecting this response, pulled out her phone. She swiped through a series of photos and turned the screen toward us. Is this you, Mrs. Porter? She asked, her voice steady. I looked at the screen, expecting to see a standard police mugshot or something, but instead it was a photograph of a woman who looked eerily like Amanda. The woman was dead, her eyes closed, lips slightly parted, but it was her. The same brown hair, the same face, the same features. Amanda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That? That's me, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I'm right here. How can that be? I stared at the photo, my mind refusing to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman in the photo was identical to Amanda, but the thought that this could be some kind of mistake was slipping away faster than I could hold on to it. How could this be? The captain set the phone down carefully. This woman was involved in the car accident. Her name is Jessica Larson, she said. And the details of the accident, well, they don't add up. We need to run a DNA test on both of you. The words felt like a punch to the gut. DNA tests? To confirm that the woman I had known for years, the woman I loved, was somehow not the person she'd always been? Wait, hold on, I said, standing up. What does this mean? How is this even possible? Captain Ellis met my gaze with steady eyes, her tone not unkind but firm. It means that what we're dealing with here is more complicated than we thought, and we need to know exactly what's going on. This situation is beyond the ordinary. She didn't elaborate further, but I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. I sat back down, trying to process everything, but nothing made sense. Nothing was as it should have been. Amanda's hand was still holding mine, but her grip was now tight, almost desperate. I turned to her, not knowing what to say, but before I could open my mouth, she spoke. "Dylan," she said softly, almost to herself, "I think I'm losing myself." Her words felt like the final twist in a nightmare that had no end. The next few days felt like I was living in a fog, and it only thickened as more questions piled up. The DNA results came back, and the world I thought I knew completely unraveled. When Captain Ellis called, her voice was calm, but the weight of her words was suffocating. "We've run the DNA tests, Mr. Porter," she said, "and well, you're both Jessica Larson." I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean? How is that possible?" "It's impossible by normal biological standards. There should be differences, even between identical twins," she explained, her voice careful. "But in this case, there are no differences. The DNA matches perfectly. It's as if one of you is a clone." A clone. The word sat in the air like a bomb waiting to go off. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking, my stomach churning with disbelief. This wasn't just a mistake. This was something far beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Amanda's voice broke the silence, soft and filled with terror. "What does that mean, Dylan? What are they saying about me?" I looked at her, unable to give her a straight answer. "I don't know, but they're saying you're a clone, a copy of someone else." Her face went pale, her eyes wide with fear. "But I'm me. I'm not someone else. I've lived my life. I remember everything. I remember you. How can they say that I'm a clone?" I didn't have an answer. How could I explain it to her when I didn't even understand it myself? The more I thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fit together in ways that terrified me. Amanda wasn't just a woman who looked like someone else. She had been created, engineered to replicate another person's DNA. The real Jessica Larson, the woman who had died in that car accident, had once been alive, and now it seemed that Amanda's entire existence had been fabricated around her. The fear in Amanda's eyes only deepened as the days passed. She moved through the house like a ghost, unable to remember small details of her past. She couldn't recall any childhood memories clearly, and when she tried to focus on anything before meeting me, it felt like there was nothing there, just fog. I didn't know what to do. Every moment spent with her felt like a test of my sanity. One minute, I was convinced she was the same woman I had married, the woman I had built my life with. The next minute, I wasn't sure if the person sitting next to me was real at all. I kept going over our past, our first date, our wedding, all the moments in between, and it was like looking at them through a foggy window. Could they be real if she wasn't the original Amanda? Could I continue to love her, knowing what I now knew? And then there were the other questions, the ones that haunted me even more. Who had created Amanda? Who had made the decision to erase Jessica Larson from existence and replace her with someone else? The investigation into Jessica Larson's death turned up something even darker. They discovered that Dr. Ellen Carter, a geneticist with a history of illegal research, had been behind it all. She had been running an underground cloning operation, creating duplicates of people for clients who paid a high price for their own personal copies. Amanda, my Amanda, was one of those copies. She wasn't the person I thought she was. She was a product, manufactured for a purpose I still couldn't understand. I couldn't help but feel betrayed. And yet, when I looked at Amanda, I saw the same woman who had been by my side for 7 years. She had been real in every way that mattered. But now I didn't know what was real anymore. I didn't know who to believe. Was she a clone, or was she just the woman I loved, regardless of where she had come from? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as we sat together in silence. The days that followed were filled with more questions than answers. The investigation into Dr. Ellen Carter and her illegal cloning operation uncovered more disturbing truths, but they still couldn't answer the one question that gnawed at me every waking moment. Who was Amanda, really? Was she a clone, or was she the woman I had spent the last 7 years with? Amanda seemed to be unraveling more with each passing day. Her memories, the core of who she thought she was, were full of holes. There were large sections of her life before she met me that she couldn't remember. She would look at photographs of her childhood and feel a strange sense of familiarity, but the details were fuzzy, distant, like trying to grasp smoke with her bare hands. Her parents? She couldn't remember their faces clearly. Her hometown? The name barely resonated with her. One night, as we sat together on the couch, the weight of it all pressing down on us, she finally spoke. "Dylan," she said softly, her voice trembling, "what if I'm not who I think I am? What if I was just made to be someone else? Someone's replacement?" Her words cut through me like a blade. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was real, that she was my Amanda. But the truth was, I didn't know anymore. What did it even mean to be real? The woman in front of me had all the memories I associated with my wife, our wedding, the trips we took, the inside jokes we shared. But she didn't have the same origin as the person I thought I married. It was hard to reconcile the life we had with the truth that she might not be who she thought she was. "I don't know," I admitted, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. "I keep thinking about everything we've been through, everything we've shared, and part of me wants to believe you're the same woman I fell in love with. But the other part of me keeps asking, what if you're not?" Amanda flinched, but then she looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "But I am the same person, Dylan. I remember all of it. The way you kissed me on our first date, how you laughed at that stupid joke I made about the waiter. I remember everything I felt when I was with you. That has to count for something, right?" Her voice cracked at the end, and I felt my heart shatter a little more. How could I explain the conflict tearing me apart? On one hand, she was right. The woman I had spent my life with, the woman who knew my deepest thoughts, who made me laugh when I was down, who held me when I cried, was sitting right in front of me. On the other hand, the knowledge that she was created in a lab, that her memories might be implanted, made it impossible for me to fully accept her without reservation. We spent hours talking, or rather, I spent hours listening to her. She needed to know that I still saw her as her, but how could I tell her I was no longer sure? She needed me to believe she was real, but every day that belief chipped away just a little bit more. Over the next few weeks, things didn't improve. We visited the place where Amanda had been created, a converted facility deep in the rural desert, abandoned after Dr. Carter's operation was exposed. The place was barren now, a shell of what it had been. There were no answers there, just a hollow reminder that Amanda had been made, not born. We saw the other clones, the women who had been kept in stasis, their futures stolen by the same twisted dream that had stolen Amanda's past. As we left, Amanda took my hand, her grip tight but steady. "I want to stay with you," she whispered, her voice soft but determined. "I know I'm not the original person. I know I'm not who I was supposed to be. But the life I've lived with you, the love I've shared with you, that's real, Dylan. Doesn't that count for something?" It felt like the weight of the world shifted in that moment. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I loved her, no matter what. She might not be the woman I thought she was, but she was the woman I had chosen. And in the end, that's what mattered. "We'll figure this out," I said, squeezing her hand. "Together." And somehow, for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe we would. The days that followed were a delicate balancing act. Amanda and I had decided to stay together, to try to make sense of the life we had, despite everything that had been upended. But each day, It felt like we were walking on a tightrope, trying to keep our footing while the world around us seemed to crumble. She was still the woman I had married, the woman I loved, but the more I tried to push the reality of her origins out of my mind, the more it gnawed at me. There was no easy way to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the truth I was now faced with. We tried to find normalcy again, dinner together, quiet evenings spent watching TV, long talks about everything and nothing. But there was always an undercurrent of tension, an unspoken fear that things could never go back to the way they were. Amanda was trying so hard to hold it together, but I could see the cracks starting to show. The doubt, the fear, the uncertainty, it was eating away at her, even if she tried to hide it. I hated that I couldn't fix it, that I couldn't tell her everything was going to be okay when I wasn't sure myself. One night, a few weeks after our visit to the facility where Amanda had been created, we sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the desert horizon. It was one of those peaceful moments we used to have, just the two of us, no need for words. But tonight, it felt different. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken thoughts. "I still don't remember everything," Amanda said, breaking the silence. Her voice was small, tentative. "I remember things from when we were together, from our life. But the earlier parts of my life, before you, they feel like they belong to someone else." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her that it didn't matter, that the memories we had shared were enough. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't that simple. "It's not your fault, Amanda," I finally said, the words coming out softer than I meant. "You didn't ask for this. None of this is your doing." "I know," she replied, her voice shaking. "But it feels like it's all I am now. Just some kind of replacement. I wasn't even born to be here. I don't know how to live with that." I reached for her hand, feeling the weight of her words press down on both of us. The life we had built together, the one I thought we would keep building, was based on a lie. But that didn't change the fact that I still loved her. That didn't change the fact that we had a history, a future, even if that future was uncertain. "I love you," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't care about where you came from, Amanda. What matters is who you are now, who you've become. You've lived with me, you've shared your life with me. That's what makes you real. That's what matters." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of relief in them. It was brief, but it was enough. She squeezed my hand tightly, the tension in her body slowly starting to ease. "I'm scared, Dylan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What if this is all I'll ever be? A copy, a replacement. What if I'm never truly me?" I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know how to fix everything that was broken. But I knew one thing for sure. I was here, and I was choosing her. And that had to be enough. For both of us. "We'll figure it out," I said, pulling her into a hug. "We'll figure it out together. I'm not going anywhere." We stayed there on the porch for a while, the quiet of the night wrapping around us like a blanket. It wasn't perfect, and I knew it never would be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe we had a chance. Maybe, despite everything that had happened, we could rebuild. A few months passed, and things slowly started to settle into a new kind of routine. It wasn't the same as before. There were still moments when the weight of everything would crash down on us, when the reality of Amanda's origins would loom over us like a shadow. But we learned to navigate it, to carve out spaces in our lives where we could just be us, even if the foundation of our life had been shaken to its core. Amanda still had her doubts, and who could blame her? She would often stare at herself in the mirror, as though searching for something, some sign that she was truly who she thought she was, that her feelings, her experiences, weren't just the result of some carefully constructed memory. But then she'd look at me, and I could see the love in her eyes, the same love that had been there when we first met. That was real. That was enough. But it wasn't just Amanda I had to learn to live with. It was myself. I had to learn to reconcile my feelings, to find peace with the truth that the woman I loved wasn't the person I thought she was. Some nights, I would lie awake beside her, listening to her breath, wondering how much of the past we had shared was really ours. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that she wasn't born to be with me, that someone had decided her fate long before I ever met her. I couldn't shake the thought that our love was built on something that wasn't real. And yet, every time I kissed her, every time we laughed together, those doubts would momentarily slip away. The love we shared was still as real as it had ever been. One evening, we found ourselves sitting on the couch together, both of us lost in our thoughts. Amanda had been quieter than usual that day, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. She looked at me, her eyes tired but filled with determination. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice low, "about who I am, about what I'm supposed to be." I nodded, my heart sinking a little. "I know. I've been thinking about it too. I know I can't change the past," she continued, her hands trembling slightly, "but I want to be more than just a replacement. I want to find a way to be me, not just the person I was made to be, but the person I've become." The pain in her voice cut through me. I had always known she felt this way, but hearing it aloud, seeing how much it hurt her, made it feel more real. I knew how hard this must be for her, living with the knowledge that her entire existence had been manufactured. But I also knew she was more than the circumstances of her creation. She was Amanda, the woman I had chosen to love, and I wasn't going to let her forget that. "You are you," I said softly, taking her hand in mine. "No matter what happened before we met, the person you are now is all that matters. You've lived a life, a real life, and that's something no one can take away from you." She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder, and for a moment we sat in silence, the weight of the world briefly forgotten. The doubts, the questions, the fears, they were still there, lurking in the background. But in that moment, I felt like we had found something solid to hold on to. We didn't have all the answers, and maybe we never would. But we had each other, and for all the uncertainty that hung over us, that was the one thing I knew I could count on. "I don't have all the answers either," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "but we'll figure it out, together." Amanda smiled, a small, sad smile, but there was something in it that made me believe things might be okay. We still had a long way to go, but in that moment, it felt like we were finally on the right path, together. It's strange how life can change in an instant. One moment, everything is ordinary, even routine, and the next, you're standing in the middle of a storm, trying to find your footing in a reality that doesn't quite fit. That's how it felt, even now, months after everything had been turned upside down. Amanda and I had made our peace with the fact that her past, her true past, wasn't what she had believed. But peace, as I was starting to understand, didn't mean things went back to the way they were. It meant learning how to move forward with the new version of our lives. We didn't talk about her origins all the time anymore, though. There were still moments when the silence between us stretched too long, or when Amanda's eyes would lose focus, and I'd know she was drifting back to those dark thoughts. I hated those moments. They reminded me of the distance between us, the part of her that she couldn't reach, the life she couldn't remember. But those moments were fewer. We'd started building new memories. We'd gone on a weekend getaway to the coast, something simple, something that didn't require any questions about who she was or why she was here. It was just the two of us, walking along the beach, our fingers intertwined as we talked about things that mattered in the here and now. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe we could be okay. But I still had to face the questions, the ones that lingered in the back of my mind, that I tried not to think about, but couldn't escape. Who had created Amanda? Why had they done it? What was the purpose of it all? Was she just a tool, a pawn in some twisted game? And if she was, did that make our love any less real? The truth was, I didn't know the answers. There were still pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit, mysteries that no one seemed to have the answers to. But we were getting by. We were together, and for all the uncertainty, that meant something. One evening, after dinner, we sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Amanda's eyes were closed, her head tilted back slightly, just taking in the night air. There was something peaceful about the moment, like time had stopped for just a few minutes, and we could pretend that nothing had changed. I watched her, the woman who was and wasn't my wife. There were times when I still saw the person I had married, the way she smiled, the way she laughed, the way her hand felt in mine. But then there were other times when the doubts would creep in, when I'd wonder if she would ever truly feel like herself again, or if I would. Dylan, she said softly, pulling me from my thoughts. Do you ever wonder if I'm really me? Her voice was quiet, and I could tell she was still struggling. I didn't have to ask what she meant. The question had lingered between us for months, unspoken but always there. I set my glass down and took her hand. Every day, I said honestly, but not in the way you think. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. What do you mean? I mean, I wonder if I'm the one who's real. I wonder if I'm enough. I wonder if I'm worthy of you, given all this. I question myself, just like you question who you are. Her face softened, and she squeezed my hand. You're real to me, Dylan. You are. The words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, I realized something important. Maybe we never would. Maybe we'd never be able to erase the uncertainty, the questions, the shadows that still lingered over us. But as long as we had each other, it was enough. It had to be enough. We'll figure it out, I said quietly, pulling her closer, one step at a time. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. The future was still uncertain, but in this moment, we were together. And somehow, that felt like everything.